Men reveal her name only to their important friends. Women whisper her name to other women only. But those who know call her the dirtiest girl I ever met. Due to the age of the girl, the notoriety of the people involved, and the censorable nature of the actual happenings in this movie, fictitious names will be substituted for actual names so that the dirtiest girl I ever met will be permitted to be shown without cuts. Rated R, The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hey there, welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And this week we head on down to London town to meet The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met from 1972.
The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met was directed by Pete Walker, written by Murray Smith, and was produced by Pete Walker for Pete Walker Film Productions, and is a United Producers release.
It was released in the United Kingdom under the title Cool It Carol. AIP picked it up for distribution, but used United Producers to shield themselves from having to release an X-rated movie under their own name.
They didn't want to tarnish their own brand.
Don't blame them. The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met stars Robin Askwith as Joe Sickles, Janet Lynn as Carol Thatcher, Jess Conrad as Jonathan, Derek Aylward as Tommy Sanders, Kenneth Hendel as the Pimp, Stephen Bradley as Terry, Harry Baird as Benny Gray, Chris Sanford as David Thing.
Also appearing are Peter Elliott as Philip Stanton, Claire Gordon as Samantha, Stubby Kay as Rod Strangeways, Richard Aylen as Larry McElhoop, Pearl Hackney as Mrs. Thatcher, and Martin Wildeck as Mr. Thatcher.
When we open, Harry the butcher's boy is segmenting animals. Joe, the delivery driver, comes in, and they have a short discussion about the importance of education. Then Harry, who's looking at Joe, chops his own finger off.
He seems rather unfazed by this. He says, "Oh, I just chopped off my finger."
Then he and Joe both look at what he's done.
Then majestic music plays in the soundtrack as Joe gets into his delivery truck, inspects his own finger, which is fine, and he drives off as the credits play.
He's on his rounds. He takes a small parcel of meat to a church, traveling across the grey English countryside to get there. Then he stops at a house. Then he relieves himself by the side of the road, and then he goes to a petrol station.
There, Carol Thatcher is working. Joe watches from his vehicle as she takes care of the customer in front of him in line. This customer, Tom, asks Carol to have a coffee with him, but she says she's stuck working tonight. So Tom gives up and drives off, and Carol goes to her next customer, Joe. She starts filling his tank. Joe tells her that Harry chopped his finger off.
Carol asks which one, and Joe says the young one with the dark hair, because it's Harry Jr., not Harry Sr. Joe asks her if she can come to Bananas with him. They've changed the records, he says. This is obviously some sort of club or hangout. And just like with Tom, Carol says she can't go.
She has him sign for the fuel. They will presumably be billing the butcher shop.
Back then, you could just write your name in a book and then pay later, I guess. And then Joe drives off.
So this petrol station is also in front of a funeral parlor, and it's owned by the Thatcher family.
And they live there. So Carol goes inside the house where her mother and grandmother are sitting in the kitchen. Her mother asks if that was Tom she was talking to. Carol says yes, and that he asked her out. Her mother thinks Tom's a nice boy and wonders why Carol isn't going off with him right now. Carol reminds her mother that she's supposed to be working. She asks if that nice boy Tom had anything to say, and then she asks the same about Joe. So Carol relays the story about Harry. Mrs. Thatcher asks if Joe asked Carol out. Carol says yes to coffee at Bananas, but she can't. She has to work. Mom asks if he's waiting for her there, and Carol supposes so. Mom tells her to go on ahead and meet him, and so Carol leaves. The grandmother watches her go and tells Carol's mother, "That ass will be the making of your Carol." And Carol's mom glares at her.
So Carol goes to the coffee house and meets Joe, who is spreading mustard on a sandwich. She tells Joe that she's been thinking of going to London.
Yeah, she won that, beauty contest, so she thought she'd go to London.
"That's where I'm going," says Joe. He says he's got a job lined up already, and he's leaving tomorrow.
He's going to be a motor trader, driving and selling cars and stuff. Carol says she has the address of one of the beauty contest judges who lives there, Rod Strangeways. He's a film star. Joe corrects her. He's a comedian.
He'd said he could help her if she was in town, so she just might go to London with Joe.
Joe asks what she would do there. "Model," chirps Carol, and Joe coughs.
Now they're outside in a park, and they continue their conversation.
This conversation takes place in various locations. Joe tells Carol of his connection in London. It's a man called Benny Gray. He mentions that he's black, and then says he's a clarinet player, and also his best mate. Joe will be staying with him.
Carol is still saying that she should come to London with him, and he tries to talk her out of it. "Your mother would never let you go to London with a man," he says. "She knows you," says Carol. "Besides, you're just a boy to her." "If your mom lets you," says Joe. "We'll see who's just a boy."
And now Carol's asking her mom, who says that she can't go to London at her age. Carol says that she'll be voting next year, and that if she wanted to shag Joe, she could do it here. Ask your father, Carol's mom says. Carol finds her father reading the paper. She asks if she can go to London to get a job as a model.
Her father laughs and says absolutely not. He knows what Londoners are like. She explains that Joe Sickles is going, and he's already got a job lined up. She just wants to go and see if she can make it as a model. If not, she'll be back home in a month.
Carol's mom, who's apparently on her side now, says to Carol's father that it's only a fortnight, and Joe will look after her there.
Her father looks at her and asks her to honestly answer one question for him. Is her maidenhead intact? Oh, says Carol. As a matter of fact, no. He says it's all right for her to go then.
That was really funny.
She hugs him and thanks him and scampers off, and he tells his wife they'll give her 20 pounds to take with her. Our little girl is growing up, says Carol's mother. Yes, agrees Carol's father.
And now we're with Joe at work. He's outside unloading the delivery truck with Harry Sr., and we find out that they're going to sew Harry's finger back on. Harry Sr. goes in the shop.
Just then, Carol comes to the butcher shop to confront Joe, who's not ready to leave for London. She's been to see his mother, who has no idea what Carol was even talking about when she said that she and Joe were leaving for London. They need me here, Joe says. Harry chopped his finger off. Carol says too bad, as she's headed out to London anyway.
Carol says that she's on the 440 Express to London, alone she supposes, and it won't be the same. Joe thinks for a second, and then he goes in to talk to Harry Sr. He asks if he can take his holiday now. Harry Sr. says no. Harry Jr. dropped his finger off, and Harry's mom is around the bend. Joe says that they sewed it back on. It fell off, says Harry Sr. So, can I go then, asks Joe.
Joe begs Harry Sr. to let him go, and Harry Sr. lets him go by firing him. So Joe is free to go to London.
It sounds like Joe's quitting before he gets fired, though, because he says he's fed up with this place, fingers flying all roads. I guess he did really get fired, because he gets his pink slip.
So now Joe is wearing a jacket and tie, his travel gear, as he and Carol are at the train station to catch a train for London. Carol asked him if he got sacked, and he denies this, but seeing the knowing expression in Carol's face, he confesses.
Carol reminds him of the good job he has waiting for him in London. The train pulls into the station just as Mrs. Thatcher comes running up with sandwiches for them both. She wouldn't let them leave hungry. Joe and Carol board the train with Mum trailing behind. Carol says that she won't phone because it's too dear, too expensive. Don't forget to write, shouts Mother. No, Mum, Carol calls back from inside the train.
Having boarded the train, Joe and Carol store the luggage in their train car, and music on the soundtrack plays as the train starts off.
Clackety-clacketing on the rails, according to the subtitles.
It's groovy that you're taking me with you, Joe, says Carol. Time goes by. Joe is on one side of the car reading a Penthouse magazine, but he's distracted by the sight of Carol's underpants peeking out from Carol's hiked-up skirt. She stands to get her luggage from the rack.
Carol asks if it's okay if she changes into her mini dress, and then she strips down to her panties as Joe gawks at her. She says she doesn't mind being looked at. In fact, she quite enjoys it. She asks Joe if she should keep her bra on for this outfit. Joe can't decide, so she takes it off just so Joe can see how it looks. Joe just gapes at her breasts, and then the next thing we know, they're both naked, embracing, and then he's on top of her, and a signal man spies them from a crossing.
A short time later, they're getting dressed, but Joe is feeling sorry for himself. He doesn't feel he did an adequate job. Carol tells him not to worry. She's not worried. She enjoyed it. No, you didn't, says Joe, because he couldn't, you know. Carol takes a bite from her sandwich.
Maybe it's so funny. Now we're at Paddington Station. They've arrived. They ask Bobby for a hotel, but he ignores them. Then they get into a cab at the station and ask the cabbie to take them to a cheap place. He drops them off at the Olympic Hotel, wherever that is. They go up to their room, and it has 2 twin beds and a park view.
Joe starts unpacking, and Carol wants to know why he's doing this because she was under the impression they were going to be staying with Benny Gray, the trumpeter. Clarinetist, Joe corrects her. Joe says he's just unpacking because he doesn't want his suit to get wrinkled. Carol's very excited to be in London, so she coaxes Joe to go out in the town with her. And together they explore the city, Piccadilly Circus. Then Carol wants to go to King's Road, so Joe hails another cab. The cabbie asks where about on King's Road, but Joe and Carol just hop in the cab. I guess they're going to figure that out later.
And now we're in a shop, presumably on the King's Road, that sells clothing. Carol wants to try something on. Joe, on his own, gets hit on by both of the gay proprietors of the shop, Roger and Barry. They sell Carol a jacket and give Joe a scarf and teach him how to tie it.
Yep, he can't wear it as a scarf. He has to wear it with a knot, Ascot style. Now they're at Chelsea Potter, a club, and Joe and Carol meet a couple of fellas, Jonathan and Terry.
Jonathan is very taken with Carol. Joe buys everyone a drink, and Jonathan toasts to Carol's freckle. By the time they leave the club, Jonathan and Carol are very cozy. They're embracing on the sidewalk. Terry and Jonathan invite Joe and Carol to a party, but Carol says that Joe has an early start tomorrow, so they have to go back to their hotel room. Jonathan and Terry offer to drop them off at their hotel in their car, so they don't have to walk.
When Joe and Carol return to their hotel room, Carol realizes that Joe never called Benny Gray while they were out. Well, it's a bit late now, says Joe. I thought you said he was a swinger, says Carol. Joe says he's probably working now. As a performer, he's going to work late into the night, showbiz hours. Carol asks Joe when he's supposed to start working at the car place. Joe fumbles for the words. In the morning, he says. Carol asks him where it is, and he says up west, I think. He's brushing his teeth, and she's getting undressed, ready for bed. She climbs into the bed, totally nude, and asks Joe what time he wants to awaken the next day. He turns around and nearly spits the toothbrush out of his mouth when he sees her sitting naked in bed.
The next day, Carol is dressed from head to toe in a stripy sweater set with a matching hat. She's on her own, and she goes into a large auditorium that is nearly empty of furniture. We see a model showing off clothing to elderly women, explaining how functional the fur coat she's wearing is. She can even sit down in it. Yvonne, the woman in charge, notices Carol and wants to know how she can help her.
As for Joe, he's looking for a job in the motor trade. He's got to find something quick since he's told people he's already working, and they're going to need money. He starts at the top and goes into a Rolls-Royce dealer. The owner tells him that they only take showroom personnel on recommendation from other showrooms. Joe asks him, then what does he suggest? How did he get started?
The man tells him his story and how he had rich connections that got him the job.
And Joe says it's bloody ridiculous and he walks out.
Now we're back with Carol. She's sipping tea with Yvonne, who tells her that Carol is not ready for this type of modeling, but she'd be a great photographic model. Carol's excited to hear this. Yvonne gives Carol a name, Larry McElhoop, and an address, and says she'll put in a call for her. Carol thanks her and leaves, as the elderly woman shouts that she needs Yvonne's help.
Joe goes into another car dealer looking for a job, and he's rejected on sight. And now Carol is seated in front of Larry McElhoop's desk. He's on the phone, but in between calls, he says he can't imagine why Yvonne sent her to see him. She's too short for a fashion model, for one thing. He continues his phone conversation as a dejected-looking Carol stares at the floor.
He pauses his conversation for a second to ask Carol if she would do underwear and swimsuit modeling, and Carol says yes. Then another agent comes up to her. Those types of shoots are his department. He asks if she's got any photographs on her. She says no. The agent tells her that clients need to see what she looks like. Carol understands this, so she takes off her outer layers. The entire office is amused and surprised when she's standing there in a red bra and panties.
She's even got Larry McElhoop's attention now. He asks, what's this all about? No photographs, says the agent. McElhoop tells him to get her in for some photographs. Can't do anything without photographs.
Back with Joe, he's talking to a gruff mechanic who says he would love to give Joe a job, but doesn't really mean it, and Joe has to leave again, jobless.
As he's walking back, he catches up to Carol. She asks how his first day went, and were the people he's working with nice? She's met a lot of nice people today. Joe says nothing.
They go back to Chelsea Potter, but Jonathan and Terry are no-shows, even though they'd promised to meet them there the night before. Carol prattles on about Benny Gray, and Joe says they can't afford to get out of town and go find him. Carol reassures him and says that he'll soon have his payday. As they leave, Joe looks pretty grim.
Just then, Jonathan and Terry pull up and apologize for being late. They say they had to pick up Deirdre. She's a tease. Then they all go to a casino.
Jonathan has to tell the bouncer that Scruffy Joe is with his party, as a valet removes his full-length fur coat. So apparently he's rich. Inside the club, Deirdre sweeps Joe off to the roulette table as a stripper achieves toplessness.
Jonathan and Terry drag Carol into a back room.
And apparently they're there to, well, I'm not really sure. Jonathan asks Terry whether they should be on or off, and apparently he's referring to Carol's panties because they end up taking him off. She doesn't mind. She actually happily allows this, which disappoints Jonathan, who was expecting more of a struggle.
Jonathan says that Carol must know what comes next, her being a model and all, and Terry leaves him to it and goes back out to the casino. Joe is at the roulette table, and Terry joins him. Joe loses and is wiped out. He's lost all his money. For the night, he adds.
Now we cut away to Jonathan and Carol naked on a billiard table. Very strange music plays throughout this scene. It's an insistent drum and a tinkling of fairy dust, according to the captions.
When they're finished, Jonathan and Carol emerge from the back room, and Joe sees them together and announces that he and Carol are leaving. He takes Carol outside, and she wonders what's up with him. Did he not enjoy his time with Deirdre? Then he confesses that he's lost all their money. Well, let's go back and look for it, says Carol. But that won't work. He's lost at gambling.
Joe calls her a silly cow as they walk back to their hotel.
Carol says she has 34 bob, and Joe asks where her money went. She had 10 pounds this morning, but Carol had to spend most of that on makeup.
She had the Helena Rubinstein model special.
As they head back to the hotel, Joe asks when she will start working. Carol explains that she'll have to have photos taken first.
Joe wonders why she has to pay to get her pictures taken. Isn't it supposed to be the other way around? Carol explains to Joe the necessity of a model's portfolio in order to get a job.
The next day, Carol is at a payphone trying to get a booking to have her photos taken. She's calling around saying that she's with the Larry McElhoop agency, but there are no openings at the moment. Joe is waiting outside the booth. Carol peeps out and says no luck yet, but she's got 3 more numbers to try. And shouldn't he be at work right now? He confesses that he hasn't got a job and never had one. I knew it all along, says Carol.
Sure she did.
She should have.
She should have.
Carol goes back in the booth to continue her calls. After a moment, she comes out and says this one can take her if she gets down there right away. Great, says Joe. Where are we going? We? Says Carol. You've got to get out there and get yourself a job or we'll starve.
Now Carol's in a studio where another model is being photographed. This is Samantha modeling for Laszlo. They wrap and now it's Carol's turn, but she doesn't have the 25 guineas advance payment. I looked it up, and that's actually a lot of money for someone who's only got 34 bob right now.
Laszlo says he's been burned too many times in the past. Samantha, who had just finished the previous session, suggests that her friend Tommy might be able to help. So Samantha takes Carol to speak with Tommy.
Tommy sold photographs to Mayfair in the past and shows her a centerfold he shot and asks if she'd do anything like that. Carol is game, especially when she finds out that they paid the model £150 for that centerfold picture.
Tommy says if he could take some of those saleable pictures, he can take a few for her legitimate portfolio as well. And Carol mulls this over. Okay, she says, as long as he does her pictures first.
And now we cut away to Joe, who's lurking outside a district bank.
He's hiding behind a newspaper.
And he's planning something. Now we're back with Tommy, the photographer, who's taking pictures of Carol fully nude. She asks when his pictures will be ready, and is distressed to learn that it's not till next Tuesday. She pouts, and Tommy says, well, maybe Monday night. And not to worry, her photos were marvelous.
Carol leaves, and Samantha comes in to see how the session went. Tommy says she's a natural. The pictures were so good, they might be able to sell them to Playboy. That will pay her $1,000 and another $1,000 for them as well. Carol returns to the hotel room very excited. Joe is already there, following a long day of failure. She asked how his day went and did he get a job. He says yes, but doesn't elaborate. Carol tells him about her day, and if the photos that were taken sell, she can make thousands. She looks at the papers sprawled out on the bed in front of Joe, maps and such. Joe says he's going to rob the bank. That's his new job. He spent the whole day watching it, and he's got it all planned out.
She's upset, but he says he hasn't eaten since yesterday, and he figures that if she works as a decoy, he could pull it off. She rips up his plans. And then Joe tells Carol that she should just go home while she still has her ticket, but she says she's staying. Someone has to keep an eye on him.
But in the meantime, they'll have to figure out how they're going to eat.
Joe unwraps a sausage roll. It's not much, but it's something. Then he tells Carol that maybe she should have gotten Jonathan to pay her $10 for what she did for him last night. Carol slaps the sausage roll out of his hand and then goes to stare at the window. Joe apologizes and says that he hasn't got a penny. Literally not one penny.
That night, a completely naked Carol climbs into bed with Joe. He still looks worried. She says she can't sleep, and he tells her to go back to bed. She says she was thinking about what Joe had said about Jonathan. Joe says nothing. She asks him why he didn't bring pajamas. I forgot, says Joe. Joe's still worried about money, and Carol asks if they can even afford this place. She nuzzles into him, but Joe turns away. Sorry, Carol, he says.
The next day, the two of them are going window shopping. They're looking at food and jewelry. At the jewelry store, a cop shoos them away from the window.
They make their way to a park bench, and Joe laments that he hasn't eaten in a day and a half now. We must get some money, agrees Carol. Joe suggests it might be time for her to return home, but Carol says that if they can make it through the week, those photos she took might make them thousands. Joe asks if they were naked photos, and Carol confirms this. She says they just need to figure out how to get some money in the meantime, without robbing a stupid bank.
And then they move on. Joe asks Carol why she got angry for implying she should have gotten paid to screw Jonathan. Carol says, well, it's not nice, is it? He asks if he'd offered her money, would she have taken it? She flashes back to their encounter, with musical cues and all, and says yes. Joe thinks it's a sexy thing. Carol asks if that turns him on. No, says Joe. He's just thinking. He knows a way they can make a few quid.
So Joe takes Carol to a street corner and explains that this is where they do it. Do what? Carol asks. Pick up the men, he says. He and Benny Gray used to come here all the time.
Carol says, Joe, are you trying to ask me something? Joe just stares. Well, it's better than robbing banks, she says. I just can't believe people pay for it. Sex, you know?
So Joe suggests Carol try it out. Carol walks up to a man and asks if he'd like to go to bed with her. The man gives her a funny look, and then his wife sees the two of them talking, and she drags him away. So Carol continues on to another man. This man seems to be asleep on his feet. Joe is watching from across the street, urgency showing on his face, and his stomach grumbling.
And we also see someone else watching. There's a skeezy man in his car witnessing all of this.
A third man smiles at her, but he also continues on his way. Carol sighs and returns to Joe. I can't do it, she says.
Joe agrees. Then the man in the car honks his horn and calls Carol over. A bit young, aren't you, he asks. It'll cost you, Carol says. The man agrees, and then she motions to Joe. My friend comes too, she says. Get in, he says, opening the door for both of them. This really stretched my suspension of disbelief. What man allows a woman and her pimp, I guess, to get in the car with him? I don't think it works that way. Not that I would know. But then they drive off.
So Carol and Joe follow this man up to his flat. The man puts a kettle on the stove and tells them that he doesn't plan on an exhibition, meaning Joe will not be watching. Then he tells Carol £5, and he has her follow him into the bedroom. Joe looks around the flat, waiting for them to finish.
In the bedroom, the man starts to undress. He says he's happily married, he just can't get enough of it. And then Carol removes her sweater coat and dress. In the living room, Joe hears the two of them moaning from the other room, and the kettle is also steaming and hissing. And then it sounds like they finished, both of them.
Joe goes into the kitchen to prepare the tea, placing everything on a tray, and the man and Carol come out of the bedroom. I've made some tea, says Joe. Carol sits down next to Joe. I couldn't find any biscuits, says Joe. Oh, says the man. He pulls £5 out of his wallet. All right for tomorrow? Asks the man. Joe stares into space and Carol asks what time. Same time, says the man. I'll meet you outside the Chelsea drugstore. I'll get some biscuits.
Joe and Carol walk back to the hotel. The next day, as promised, the man picks them up. However, once they get to the apartment, they find that there are two old men sitting on the couch. The man, now known as the Pimp, says that these two want the same service, and there'll be two more coming up later. That's 25 quid, he says. Carol looks around and then says, all right, just this once, and goes into the bedroom.
Joe tries to follow her, but the pimp blocks the door. So Joe sits with the other men as they wait for their turn with Carol.
One of them offers him a beer.
Another, younger man enters, and the pimp collects his money. The remaining men exchange awkward glances.
Now the oldest man goes in to have the first turn with Carol. He pays the pimp, who whispers something to him, and then goes into the bedroom. He finishes in under a minute, and then comes out. One of the men on the couch quips, Speedy Gonzalez, as the pimp takes another bill from him. And then the young man goes in.
Upon entering the bedroom, he tells Carol to get dressed. He wants to rip her clothes off her.
In the waiting room, an even older, grosser man has joined the queue. In the bedroom, the young man, now shirtless, barks at Carol to come here, and he rips off her dress.
This goes out throughout the afternoon until all the men have had their turns, and the pimp has the final turn. Once finished, he goes over to Joe and tells Joe that all these men had given him the money, so he's going to be taking a cut. After all, he's the one who brought in all the business. He hands Joe some money and tells him he can let himself out. Then he asks same time tomorrow. Joe lunges at the pimp, but the pimp sidesteps and Joe flings himself into the sofa. "What's the matter?" asks the pimp. "Not enough jam on your bread?"
Joe tries again, but the pimp headbutts him. He tells Joe to smash the place up if he wants to. It belongs to the estate agency anyway, and then he leaves. Joe gets up and goes into the bedroom where Carol is sitting, wrapped in a towel and staring into space, and tries to apologize.
He tells Carol he's sorry. He didn't want this. Carol tells him she never wants to do that again. Joe says she could have gone home. "And leave you alone without any money?" says Carol. Joe tells Carol that he loves her. He starts to talk about what just happened, but she shushes him, and they kiss.
Etc. As we pull out and we see them from outside the bedroom window. And now we're at the Club Velbon, where everyone is swinging. People are on the dance floor, and Joe and Carol are at the bar, where Joe is getting the two of them drinks. Carol spots Rod Strangeways and goes over to his table to talk to him. Joe pays for their expensive drinks and follows.
Rod Strangeways doesn't remember Carol, but asks that she refresh his memory. She tells him she won the beauty contest he judged last August, and now he remembers her. She introduces Joe, who has just joined them, as her manager.
She tells Rod that she tried to phone him when she got into town, which confuses Rod. And then a man joins them at the table and finishes off Rod's drink. Rod jokes that he can't complain, for he'd have him before the Race Relations Board, because the man is black, and Joe orders a magnum of champagne for the table, and Rod is impressed. He addresses the black man as Benny.
"Benny Gray?" asks Carol. Benny smiles and nods. "Joe," Carol says excitedly, "it's Benny Gray." Joe looks over with his mouth open so wide the cigar in it nearly falls out. "Joe's been trying to call you," says Carol, and Benny looks confused. "Who is this guy?" he asks Rod, who shrugs in response. Joe is hiding his head in his hands. Benny leans over and tells Joe that he had his numbers changed. "Oh," says Joe. "Thanks, Benny."
Benny does Joe a solid. And then Benny and Carol go dance. We see at the bar an old man in sunglasses watching them. Champagne arrives, and the waitress says that it's 14 pounds 10D. Pardon me, I don't understand English money from the 70s. And Joe is shocked. Back with the man at the bar, he removes his shades to stare at Carol as she's jerking around the dance floor. Back at the table, Joe's fishing around for some cash, so Rod pays the bill. He asks if Joe's broke, and Joe says just for tonight. Rod asks if Joe's getting Carol enough work. "Yes," Joe declares, and then Rod starts to tell him a joke as the song ends and everyone returns to the table.
There's a hot tub in the middle of the club, and Benny encourages Carol to take a dip. "I'd love to. What shall I wear?" asks Carol. Benny suggests she go in the all together, but Rod tells her bra and panties will be fine. "Really?" asks Carol, already taking off her clothes. She strips down and runs over to the hot tub. The man at the bar watches her with interest.
At the table, Joe asks about the man at the bar. Rod tells him his name is Philip Stanton, and that he's bad news. Joe decides to see what he wants anyway and goes to the bar. Philip asks Joe who his friend is. "Benny Gray," says the innocent Joe.
"No, the girl," corrects Philip. "Oh," says Joe, "that's Carol Thatcher. She's a model."
They look over to watch Carol frolicking in the pool, and then we see Joe and Philip having a conversation that we can't hear.
Carol joins them at the bar, and Joe excitedly tells her that Philip wants to put her in a movie, and they'll make 60 quid each. "What will I have to do?" asks Carol. "That depends upon how much money you want to make," says Philip.
She asks for more details and finds out the film is a short. She wants to know where they're going to shoot, and he says on location. And then we go to that location. It's a flat with cameras and lights set up around a circular bed. There are two men there, one man at the camera, and one very old man wearing a coat and hat and sitting in an armchair next to the bed. Carol looks around and then asks Philip if she and Joe are supposed to pretend to make love. "For 60 quid each, he asks. "Oh," says Carol, "it's the real thing."
"It's the real thing," repeats Philip. Carol goes over to Joe. "Joe, do you know what they want us to do?" "Sure," says Joe. Philip explained it all to him. It will just be the two of them. Joe's looking through the camera as he explains that this is all artistic and that a lot of people get their start through these kind of films.
"It's how you look on film that interests the professionals," he says. "And anyway, they're skint.
And these professionals are anxious to get down to work."
"Come on," barks the director. Carol asks if they need to be made up. "Eh?" asks the cameraman. And instead he gives her some stockings to wear.
Joe goes over to the mirror to disrobe and gives himself a pep talk as he does so. But nobody is paying attention to Joe because Carol is disrobing as well.
Yeah, the weird old guy is licking his lips as she does. Yuck.
Joe and Carol walk over to the bed. When you're ready, says Joe. On the contrary, says the cameraman, when you're ready. Joe's still wearing his underwear, and the cameraman tells him to drop the drawers.
They get into the bed, and Carol tells Joe to think about this afternoon. Filming starts. We don't see anything but the men watching them. Philip and the cameraman order them to slow down, order Carol to lift her legs, etc. And the gross old man appears to be masturbating. Eventually, he starts stripping, and when he's down to his underwear, he jumps on top of Joe and Carol, ruining the shot. But apparently they got paid anyways.
Yes, Joe and Carol have taken better digs. Joe says they don't have to be ashamed to invite Rod Strangeways and Benny Gray to a place like this. But Carol is confused. She's not ashamed of what she's done. She just always thought making money was harder than it seems to be.
Joe calls her a Puritan, and then the phone rings. It's Tommy for Carol. How did he get her number? Anyway, he's got a job for her. It's not pornography, it's super fashion. And in fact, it is. We see her in the studio being shot wearing a wedding dress. Tommy's at the camera, and things seem to be going pretty well.
Suddenly there is much fanfare, on the soundtrack at least, as David Thing enters.
He's wearing a red velvet suit and shades, and apparently he's somebody. He looks like a young Bill Nighy to me.
Thing walks over to Tommy and asks, is this the girl? Yes, says Tommy, her name is Carol Thatcher. Seriously? Asks Thing. Then Thing goes over to Carol and introduces himself. She tells him her name is Carol Thatcher, and one of Thing's toadies appears and says they can change that. Thing tells Carol that she's working for him now. The toadie clarifies what this means. $150 for 4 hours work.
David Thing gives his toadie a look, so the toadie adds, and the prestige of working for Mr. Thing.
Carol says she's busy right now, and he should speak to her manager, Joe.
And Joe takes them out of the room so Tommy can finish shooting.
Next we see David Thing, Tommy, Joe and Carol all negotiating over lunch in Joe and Carol's room. Joe says that 4 hours at 150 pounds will only leave him with 10, so they up the offer to 160. But it's too late to do anything this afternoon, and tomorrow Carol's still scheduled with Tommy, so the negotiations continue when the phone rings, and Carol goes to the bedroom to answer it.
Thing asks Tommy where he got her. Tommy says Samantha. In the bedroom, Carol's taking the call and then calls Joe in. It's Philip Stanton. Joe gets on the phone and finds out that Philip has another job for her. Joe instantly says no, but Philip keeps talking. It's 500 quid for one night. Just Carol, though, not Joe. And there's no filming. She just has to be very nice to an Arab sheik. Joe relays this to Carol, who objects to the Arab part more than anything else. Joe says he's a sheik. He probably went to Eton.
Joe's excited by the numbers. 500 pounds for a night's work sounds pretty good to him. But Carol asks if the 160 pounds they just booked isn't enough. But Joe says that an additional 500 pounds will really set us up.
Us? Asks Carol. Yes, says Joe. And Joe says it won't be anything like her last whoring encounter. He's a sheik. Carol supposes it might be a bit romantic. So she gets on the phone and tells Philip yes. Philip explains the arrangements. Carol's to meet the sheik at the back of a very big hotel to avoid his 6 wives and 18 concubines, all of whom are madly jealous.
Joe returns to David Thing. David and his toady want to meet Joe for dinner that night to further negotiate the contract, but Joe tells them that they've got plans tonight.
Thing giggles for some reason.
Then, in a whirlwind montage, we see Carol dressed as a nun to sneak off with the sheik. She models for David Thing, and her modeling career is taking off, and she's still working with Philip Stanton on the side.
Carol looks pretty tired as she's being squired around, photo shoots by day and escort gigs by night.
And Joe's counting the money.
Next, we see a fancy car dropping Joe and Carol, still wearing that weird sweater dress contraption, off at a fancy house. The driver offers to take their bags to the bedroom, and then asks if they're going to need the car again tonight. They won't. And then they go into the parlor.
Carol wonders if they can afford this place. Joe says they can, and at the rate she's going, they can also afford to have it redecorated. They can have it done up to look more like Tommy's place. Mrs. Fraser, who's with the caterer for the party they're throwing tonight, appears behind them and asks about the arrangements for this evening. Let her know how many they're expecting, and the caterer will get straight to it. Then we cut to the party. Everyone is there.
It's everyone they've met in London. Samantha, Rod Strangeways, David Thing, Philip Stanton, etc., etc.
Mary Hacklehoop, Benny Gray, Roger and Barry.
Carol makes the rounds. Barry and Roger from the shop find Joe and pull him down to sit with them, much to his chagrin.
Carol approaches Philip Stanton, and he offers her more work, 2 nights a week with a member of the government. It pays 400 pounds a week. Carol says she doesn't want to work all night long, but Philip tells her it'll be short nights. He's got a bad heart. She agrees, but with a lack of enthusiasm for it.
Then we go back to Rod Strangeways, who's with Benny telling a dumb joke. And then Jonathan and Terry come in, and Carol sees them and tries to engage Jonathan's attention. Carol keeps flashing back to her encounter with Jonathan, but Jonathan keeps it breezy and pushes past her to the rest of the party. We see Joe seated, taking jobs from Carol from all attendees, and the party continues as another girl strips to dance.
This continues on, and Joe and Carol look at the group of people they've assembled and realize that they don't really fit in with this crowd. The next day, Joe is going over the books. He's booked over 2,000 pounds for the week in just one night. A bit of modeling, a couple of regular customers, including the cabinet member. And that's a lot of money. Carol's in the top bracket now. They can afford almost anything. Joe suggests that next month they take a break, maybe a trip to Paris. Carol asks Joe if he's happy. Is this what he's always wanted? Joe pours the remains of a champagne bottle into a potted plant. No, he says. Let's go home, says Carol.
And now the train is clackety-clacking back home. Carol is still at the pumps, and Tom Pender is still hitting on her. He asks if she got in a fight with Yul Brynner in London. Carol doesn't know. She hardly saw him. She brushes Tom off again, and then the butcher's truck is there, and so is Joe and Harry Jr. with his finger stump bandaged. Carol gasses up their truck, and Joe asks if she's going out with Tom Pender. Harry Jr. asks Joe what's it to him. He's not her manager, is he? No, says Joe, grinning at Carol. You can be sure of that. And he and Carol share a sly grin. Joe gets back in the truck, and the two of them drive off as the music swells up into a bombastic finale. And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met from 1972.
The working title for the film was Oh, Carol. According to the opening credits, this story is true, but actual names and places are fictitious. The film apparently having been inspired by an article the director read in The News of the World.
The film was shot on location in the villages of Northiam and Bodiam in Sussex and throughout London. Locations in London include Paddington Railway Station, Duke of Wellington Place in Hyde Park, Eaton Square, Battersea Bridge, and La Vauban, the club on Kingly Street where Carol and Joe visit.
The character of photographer Tommy Sanders, played by Derek Aylward, was reportedly based on Mayfair magazine photographer Philip O. Stearns. The photo shoot scene was filmed at Stearns' studio, and stills appeared in Mayfair in July 1970.
David Mayberry said he got the role of Harry the Butcher's son thanks to Robin Askwith, who encouraged him to audition. The two were friends and had attended drama school together.
This was Janet Lynn's film debut and her only starring role. She allegedly got the role despite Susan George being the producer's first choice for the role. Janet Lynn told Helen Reed, writing for the Bristol Western Daily Press, that although she herself would never do a striptease, but if a part in a film says strip, I strip. She called the experience embarrassing at first, but said director Pete Walker made it as easy as possible by clearing the set during her nude scenes. She said, I haven't arrived at the stage where I can pick and choose what I appear in. I have to take what is going. But I would hate to be labeled forever as a stripper. My next film will have to be something different. She said that she didn't watch the movie with her parents, but their reaction surprised her. They took it very well, saw the moral of the story, and were not a bit shocked.
In another article, this one in the London Daily Mirror, Janet Lynn talked about working with Robin Askwith, saying, he was a really nice boy, and when we'd rest after a love scene, we'd go and have coffee together or something. We'd completely forget what we've been doing in front of the cameras and chat about what was on television the night before. She also said that if you have to play a love scene, it helps if the boy's good looking. You feel emotion, but only as far as the part calls for it.
Is he good looking?
I don't know. I can tell you what I think, but I can't tell you what the universe thought.
I think he definitely looks British.
Yeah, he does. He got a lot of roles.
Yeah, he's in Queen Kong. In an interview published in the Birmingham Post in June of 1972, shortly before his film opened in the United States, Pete Walker said that it was his favorite of all the sex films so far. Cool It Carol has just been released in the United States under the title The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met, and I think that's unfair. He also said, I would like to make better films, but people don't want to see them. I would like to make the sort of films Hitchcock makes, because that is what films are all about. I don't take my films too seriously. I would hate to think my audiences did. I hope they go to see them for a giggle.
And just like his idol Hitchcock, Pete Walker appeared in cameos of most of his films. In The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met, he plays a priest in the park when Joe and Carol are resting, and he hears Joe say, Christ, I'm hungry.
Cool It Carol was released in the UK on December 1st, 1970, and as The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met, it was released in the United States in May of 1972 and paired in some markets with Dagmar's Hot Pants Incorporated. The film received an X rating in both countries.
Ken Heinrich, in a syndicated column published in August of 1972, wrote, Trans-American Films says it is changing the name of its film Oh Carol to The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met, ugh, end quote. Later in the month, Barbara Funkhauser in the El Paso Times reported that The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met has now received an R rating. Under the title of Oh Carol, it was an X, and that led to some confusion for us. I couldn't find any newspaper ads, and I saw quite a few that were listed under the name of Oh Carol, and nothing connected this with Trans-American before that one article that I found.
Newspaper ads for The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met included the following disclaimer. Public notice. Conditions of admission. The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met will be permitted to be shown complete and without cuts. Due to the censorable nature of the actual happenings in this story, as well as the age of the girl and the fame of the people involved, the producers have agreed to the following conditions. 1. Admittance will be denied to anyone under the age of 18, even if accompanied by a parent or guardian.
2. Fictitious names will be substituted for all actual names.
3. This notice will be displayed prominently in full view of prospective patrons at the site of the theater playing the film.
4. Patrons will be advised of the shocking nature of the film and will be urged to guide themselves accordingly. Taglines for Cool It Carol include, You're every girl who said, well, just this once.
And for The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met, the story of a girl who explores the world of love.
She is what you think she is.
Overpowering and underage.
Gross. She raises more than eyebrows.
In the Blu-ray extras, Jess Conrad said that Cool It Carol was a success.
We also found an image of an ad published in Rob Craig's American International Pictures Comprehensive Filmography, where AIP was touting the success of The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met in the drive-ins. Apparently it did quite well for them there. Winton Cooper in the Huddersfield Daily Examiner in West Yorkshire, England, said of Cool It Carol, "Despite the weak script, there is some reasonable playing, albeit with limited material, by the two leads, Janet Lynn, a very endearing girl, and Robin Askwith, period." But he said of the story, it treats a young couple from the provinces who go to London to seek their fortunes so unfairly and portrays them as being so naive that if by some chance the story is completely true, one is tempted to be rather cruel and declare that the trouble and moral degradation they suffer serves them right. He also thought that the ending, where Carol and Joe leave London before making £2,000 in 1 week, was unrealistic. It's only the comedy, though some of it is in dubious taste, and the moralizing at the end which saves this film from being another third-rate skin flick. It's second-rate.
Peter Holmes in the Swindon Advertiser said Cool It Carol was a piece of straight titillation cinema and said there was a moral at the end that money is not everything, but the evidence is quite different from the film and its idea of the good life. Carol never seems to get warm enough to need cooling, even if it seems she would undress as soon as say hello.
Madeline Harmsworth in the London Sunday Mirror said, "The Carol of Cool It Carol spends most of her time undressing and sleeping with various men of assorted taste for money. The rest she spends saying she never wants to do that again." This nauseous film about a village girl and boy who come to London on a spree and quickly learn the pounce and prostitute business is supposed to be a true story. Sometimes the truth is better kept hidden.
Obie Morrison, in his Broadway beat column for the Passaic, New Jersey Herald News, wrote, "Do some titles short-circuit your desire to see the shows they designate? Are you attracted to a French-produced movie called Dirty Lovers? How about an American picture, Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met? Ignoring any question of morality, do they suggest stories about characters you'd like to know and spend time with?"
A reader going by the name of Opedipus, and that's not a typo, that's how it was spelled out in the paper, wrote a letter to the editor of the Alexandria, Louisiana Daily Town Talk on the subject of movie censorship after a local theater was threatened with an injunction for showing the Last Picture Show. The writer objected to that, saying that if the district attorney wants to investigate movies and crack down on pornography, why didn't he visit the twin-screen drive-ins here, which advertised The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met and Dagmar's Hot Pants? The movie would be referenced in a few other letters to the editor on the same subject as well. Apparently the whole town was incensed that they threatened to take away the Last Picture Show.
In an article published in the Lincolnshire Echo in January of 1971, Janet Lynn admitted that she was living on hope as she hadn't gotten any film offers since working on Cool It Carol. In fact, she had to go on the dole, as the paper said, getting money from her local labor exchange. "It's certainly been proving difficult to break into films. In fact, I've had to use sex appeal to make it," she said. "But if blue movies are all that's offered, I'd rather quit show business and work behind a counter somewhere."
Well, this movie was not what I was expecting it to be. With a title like The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met, I thought it was going to be kind of a sleazy, smutty movie, and it's not that at all.
I remember when we first started gathering our films for this podcast, and we only knew it under the title Cool It Carol, and it was one that you were kind of anxious to see.
I think I just wanted to see why Carol needed to be cooled down.
Well, now you know.
I think that they were just cooling her ambitions. But this actually is kind of a sweet movie, aside from the prostitution and naked modeling.
Which is a good chunk of the movie.
But not so much. A lot of that is done montage style. We do have to stay with Carol during the awful prostitution scene where she gets pimped out without knowing it and has to sleep with 5 guys in one afternoon. And they're all varying degrees of gross. So that was maybe the low point of the movie. But the rest of it, it's all kind of silly fun.
Yeah, and the thing is, Carol was likely on her way to a successful modeling career if she had just stayed slow and steady instead of going to the prostitution thing, which would probably tarnish any success she would have had as a legitimate model, because that stuff would come out in the open eventually.
I don't know. I mean, we're talking about a country that published naked girls on page 6 of the newspaper every day. So I don't know that it would necessarily be a detriment to a certain type of modeling career. She might not have been like high fashion like Twiggy, but I think she could have easily done.
I'm not talking about the nude pics. I'm talking about the prostitution.
I am too.
Oh, okay.
I mean, obviously being nude is not an obstacle to success, but prostitution, it might be, but it depends on the kind of success you're going for. I mean, as an escort to famous men, the famous men never get tarnished by having escorts. So why should the escorts be tarnished by being with them? I think a lot of that is just frowned upon without being ruinous to the women involved, as long as the men are famous enough.
You're right about that. And Carol is lucky that she is able to exploit her body because she can't exploit her brain. She's not very bright.
Neither one of them is very bright. Joe Sickles is the worst liar I've seen on film in a long time.
I think he's good at it.
Well, just because Carol's the dumbest girl we ever met.
That could have been the title.
That would have been better than Dirtiest Girl. I don't think she comes off as all that dirty or sleazy or any of the epithets that people apply to sex workers or women who take their clothes off for money. She retains some innocence to her.
Yeah, she's a small town girl throughout.
I think the dirtiest part is that she's just 17 and she has to be with these extremely old men. Although we found out that the man who played Philip Stanton, the pornographer, he looks like he's about 68 in this movie. He was 20 years younger, though, at least. Just how people appeared back then, much more aged than they do now.
And speaking of his character, it's kind of weird to think that a guy who produces stag films will also have the job of entertaining a sheik while he's in town.
But it goes with the rest of the movie where this is sort of a fairy tale and a fantasy where things happen for Carol so fast, despite the fact that she has no idea what she's doing. She doesn't have a portfolio. She has just a few connections who seem not really on the up and up. And yet all of a sudden she's booking 2,000 quid in a week. That doesn't really seem realistic, but that's the power of the montage.
It is. And a big part of this is Joe exploiting her too.
Yeah, he was very oblivious to the fact that they're making money off her having to sleep with disgusting men. He really didn't seem affected too much by it, even though he had feelings for her.
Well, when he told Carol that he loved her, it was when he was sixth in line that day.
That might have been more guilt than anything, too. I think he cares for her. They don't end up together, at least not that we can tell. He just may have felt bad for exploiting his friend at that moment and wanted to make himself feel better about it.
That seems to be more in line with his character.
He was really excited about the bunny, but he did agree to go back fairly easily once Carol asked him.
I guess in retrospect, it was kind of fortuitous that they hit that crossroads as early as they did, because if they had collected that 2,000 pounds for that week, it probably would have been harder to walk away.
It's not so easy. Once you sign a contract, then you've got legal troubles if you try to break it. So apparently that wasn't an issue. But again, like I said, this is kind of a fairy tale.
Yeah, this is the first X-rated film that we've covered on the podcast. The version that we watched had the on-screen title of Cool It Carol, and we watched it from the Kino Lorber release of the Pete Walker Crime Films collection.
So we didn't see theatrical Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met. We don't have access to that.
But it was probably cut down from this.
As AIP often did, but was this even AIP? You kind of went down a rabbit hole on that.
Yeah, trying to figure out what the link is between United Producers and AIP. We know AIP Exchange handled the distribution. And if you look on IMDb, AIP is listed as the distributor. United Producers isn't listed at all.
Right, and they did make that ad for other theaters with their own name on it.
Because it was American International Film Exchange.
And it has an AIP number.
And there's a production number, yeah. So we know that AIP was involved. That's why we're talking about it now. But the relationship with United Producers is kind of up in the air. Going back to Rob Craig's book, he has a small mention of it, and he can't figure it out either. It was a company that was in existence as early as the early 60s. And when they started their relationship with AIP, or whether it was always an extension of AIP, he wasn't able to determine, and so neither are we.
We don't know if AIP managed United Producers or if they just had a sometimes working arrangement for certain films.
And there's around 20 or so films that were released that we know are AIP related that were done through United Producers. And a lot of those AIP also had posters with their own artwork on it. So there's a lot of crossover. So it's really hard to tell.
And we have companies like Transamerican and Hallmark Releasing and Cinerama.
Well, Hallmark Releasing was a separate company, and they just handled their distribution through American International Film Exchange.
These other companies come up sometimes, and they're not always related to AIP. AIP just released some films for them.
Yeah, and the historical records aren't very available or accurate, so it's difficult to figure out sometimes the relationship that these films have. But we're putting them on the podcast anyway. When you're looking at the time that this movie came out, this movie has a lot of dirty old men in it. Even as far as a sex film, it's kind of innocent because at the same time, Deep Throat was playing in cinemas and was kind of a sensation. Except for maybe now when pornography is so available on the internet, that was a time when pornography was becoming as mainstream as it ever would, with films like Deep Throat and Devil and Miss Jones and things being seen as adult entertainment, not necessarily porn.
And that's why I question this movie having an X rating, because all of the sex is kept to our imagination. We're not watching anybody pretend to have sex.
There's no thrusting here.
There's no thrusting here. And there's barely any nudity. We do see Carol full frontal at one point, but the rest of the time it's just boobs and butt. And we see Robin Askwith's butt too. But either we don't see it, it's in another room, or in the porn film scene, we're watching the men watch them and we're not watching them at all. And that's the reason I'm really surprised this earned an X. This film has nudity and scenes of prostitution, but there's no actual simulation of sex.
Right. Planet of the Apes has nudity in it.
That was G, wasn't it?
It was G at the time, yeah.
So that's why I wasn't surprised to see that it got an R rating after they retitled it. That didn't make sense at all. That Cool It Carol or Oh Carol, the movie was never released under that title that I could tell. I didn't see anything like an ad for Oh Carol being in any theater.
Yeah, I think Oh Carol is probably the best title of the three.
I do too.
I think there's a character in this film we didn't talk about too much, and that's the score.
Oh my gosh. The music is crazy in this movie.
It really is. I love the part, I call it fanfare, when David Thing walks out. He comes out of his car and goes upstairs and yeah, it's trumpets blaring and it's this whole production and it's just so out there, but it's telling you, okay, David Thing is somebody. We don't really know, and we never do. We just know from the music that he's somebody and people seem honored to work with him.
It is an honor to work with him,
And he's obviously a photographer. And at the end of the movie, it's a timpani going boom, 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 boom.
There's horns and stuff that fill up your ears as the movie ends. And we have it at the beginning too. The horns are going crazy.
Yeah, it's a unique score, I think, for any film, not just this type of film, but especially this type of film.
Because it comes in the weirdest places and it's not what you'd expect. It seems like it should be some big Hollywood blockbuster that this would go with, not the dirtiest girl I ever met X-rated thing. There's another point in my column about why this shouldn't be an X-rated movie. The score is not what you'd expect for an X-rated movie.
Waka chicka wow wow.
That's what you expect. Not dun da da dun da da da. All right. We can't give this film an X rating, but we can give it a rating using our AIP system where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. Jeff, how do you rate The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met?
The Dirtiest Girl I Ever Met was one of the rare instances where I think I enjoyed the film better the second time around. Because I caught a lot of the humor in it that just went over my head the first time because I was kind of annoyed with having to watch it. Despite the sleaze and it basically being a movie about a lot of dirty old men, I thought it was kind of a fun story, even though it doesn't really go anywhere. At the end, you wind up exactly where we started. And I guess the characters learned a lesson, but I don't think it's really affected them one way or the other. But I thought it was an okay movie, and I think it's worth at least an I. So I'm going to give it an intermediate. What are your thoughts?
I enjoyed this movie so much more than I thought I was going to. I don't think this is an A movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's so much better than I thought it was going to be. Cool at Carol's not hard to find. So I would recommend that people see it, not just for prurient interest, but just because it is a comedy. We did get a giggle out of just what Pete Walker wanted. And so I think it's an I, but it's on the high side of I, and that it is fun to watch. The negative of this is definitely the prostitution scenes. Though we don't see anything, we see how it affects Carol, and it's not good. Although she does seem to be less affected by it later when she's had time to enjoy the money, to think about it. I don't know. But despite that, the rest of it's played for comedy and it's fun. So I would give it an I too.
United Producers, Trans-American Pictures, Hallmark Releasing, Map Film Company. These are just some of the companies for which American International Film Exchange handled distribution, and so all these and more are or soon will be covered on the American International Podcast. And as such, you can find out more about them on our website, AIPpod.com. Besides an easy way to bookmark and listen to past and present episodes of the podcast, you'll also find more information about the films we cover. You'll find trailers and posters, and even more as we dig up further information on these films and add it to the site. It's a work in progress, but we'd like to see it become the place on the internet to go for information about AIP, and it is constantly being updated with new information as we gather it. There's a Help Us tab where we list films we are currently looking to add to our collection so we can feature them on future episodes. If you can send us in the direction where we can find any of these films, you can contact us via the handy contact form right there on the site, or you can just use it to message us about anything else you'd like us to know about. There's also a link to our store where you can find American International podcast-related merch, and a purchase through that link will not only get you a cool t-shirt or mug, but the funds will go directly towards keeping the podcast and the website going. So join the fun at AIPpod.com.
And now that we've experienced the dirty side of fame and fortune, we're going to retire, at least from this episode. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.